And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this next installment of the APDA Passport to Research series. My name is Dave Grosby. I've got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It's been almost 4 years now. And fortunately, I had some friends in the local Northwest APDA and have had a great relationship with them and have always been happy to help after a long career as a sportscaster in Seattle, help in any way possible. And doing these Passport to Research series have been a terrific way for me to stay involved with APDA and try and help everyone who's going through what I'm going through and make life a little bit better. The dual mission of APDA, of course, is providing help for today for those living with Parkinson's, and of course, hope for tomorrow by investing in critical research projects. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm happy to be associated with the organization. Now, research is what we're here to talk about today. Since 1961, APDA has proudly invested in the most promising clinicians and scientific projects focused on the discovery of the cause and finding the cure for Parkinson's disease. APDA is committed to scientific research and has been a funding partner in many major PD scientific breakthroughs. And this Northwest chapter of APDA has proven its commitment to research by raising dollars to fully fund Parkinson's disease registry, which helps speed up the research process by connecting researchers to willing participants. Now, keep your eye on your post-event email. There'll be more information about that registry and how you can get involved. There really is some amazing research going on worldwide, including right here in the Pacific Northwest. And we hope through this series, you will learn more about the work, the people behind it, and how you can be involved. Now, before I introduce today's speakers, I want to thank the sponsors of this program, gold sponsors Niagara Bottling, and silver sponsors Kiowa Kirin and Athira Pharma. Their support of APDA and the value of educational programs like this is immensely appreciated. Now, if you missed us at the very beginning, during the program, if you have a question for the researchers, please type that question in the Q&A section, which is down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to all of them. We're today joined by two researchers, Dr. Martina Mancini and Dr. Marian Gale from the Balance Disorders Lab at the Oregon Health Sciences University in Portland, the OHSU. Dr. Gale is an assistant professor of neurology at OHSU and staff neurologist of the Portland VA Medical Center. Her research addresses interventions for gait and balance abnormalities in Parkinson's disease and related disorders, with a special focus on non-invasive neuromodulation via transcranial magnetic stimulation in progressive supranuclear palsy. Martina Mancini is currently an assistant professor of neurology and an adjunct assistant professor of biomedical engineering. She's also co-director of the Balance Disorders Laboratory at the Oregon Health and Science University. Dr. Mancini is a bioengineer focusing on the use of technologies to characterize and treat mobility impairments in people with Parkinson's disease. He's investigating the neural correlates of the mobility changes with a technology-based approach to rehabilitation. Doctors, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about yourselves and why you do research. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Gale?
Hi, thanks for having me, Dave. Thanks for this great opportunity. We're happy to, Martina and I work closely together, and we're really happy to jointly present our interests in research. So I'm a neurologist at OHSU, and I actually have an interest in both Parkinson's and some of the atypical Parkinsonian disorders that can be a bit harder to treat, things like progressive supranuclear palsy. I also have a very strong interest in exercise interventions for Parkinson's, which is the topic of a lot of our work here at OHSU. And I'm happy to be back in the Northwest. I went back to the East Coast for a few years to work. I had trained out here in movement disorders and missed my colleagues and the Balance Lab so much that I moved back to Portland area. So happy to be here and join you and look forward to a good conversation today.
Dr. Mancini?
Yes, thanks, Dave, for the nice introduction, and thank you, Marian, for following. I'm a bioengineer originally from Italy, where I got my PhD, and I moved to Portland, Oregon 12 years ago to work with Dr. Feyorak for my postdoctoral fellowship and understand balance and gait problems in people with Parkinson's disease, and how we can use technology to characterize with objective measure those motor impairments.
Talk about the Balance Disorders Lab at the OHSU and about what you're doing in that lab, Dr. Gale.
So the Balance Disorders Lab has been a long-standing lab, initially founded by Feyorak and now co-directed by Martina Mancini and Laurie King. And it's just been a super productive source of research here for OHSU, for mainly looking at Parkinson's in all stages, early stages, mid stages, and even later stages, with a strong focus on problems such as freezing of gait that are problematic for Parkinson's patients. And one of the most, I'll let Martina speak to the lab more because she's more intimately directing it, but I would say that one of the neat features is that through the years, there's been a lot of international postdoctoral researchers who have come to work with us in the Balance Lab, specifically to work with Dr. Faye Horak. And so researchers from Peru and Chile and Brazil. And so it's really an international venture for folks who are so interested in Dr. Horak's expertise in objective measurement of balance and gait disorders. So things like sensor-based measurement, force plate platforms, and all kinds of technologies to quantify balance and gait problems, and hopefully look for improvement strategies and treatment, physical therapy treatment regimens in Parkinson's.
Dr.
Mancini, talk a little bit more about that balance disorders lab then.
Sure. So what we do in the balance disorders lab is try to understand how balance changes with aging, when basically also you have sensory changes, loss of like vision and proprioceptive stimuli. How these changes happen with regular aging or with neurological diseases, with a particular emphasis in Parkinson's disease, but also expanding to multiple sclerosis, essential tremor, and with Marian, PSP as well, and atypical Parkinsonism. Not only we want to understand how the brain controls balance and gait, but also part of the lab has been historically looking at the neural correlates of gait and balance, especially with Dr. Horak, so with fMRI paradigm, and more recently with mobile imaging through a technique that is called functional near-infrared spectroscopy and mobile EEG. Studies that we had ongoing looked at different effect of cueing on gait and balance, and the effect that what happened in the cortex when you have a stimuli to help you walk. In addition to that, Dr. King and Dr. Faye Horak developed two different exercise programs called Agility Bootcamp, and data have been published in the past. The concept is basically to challenge both the motor and the cognitive system to improve certain features of balance and gait. And recently we were awarded a NIH grant to look at basically exercise targeted to improve turning. And if I can speak a little bit more about that, turning, yes, we know is affected in people with Parkinson's disease, and often more affected than regular straight ahead walking. And since these impairments can happen from early on, and turning really needs not only motor, but also coordination of eye, trunk, and lower limbs, as well as axial flexibility and anticipatory postural adjustment to turn. All of these concepts are affected in people with Parkinson's disease and can preclude a safe and effective turn. And so since also turning has a direct link with falls and increases the risk of breaking the hip during if somebody falls during turning, we recently developed an intervention targeting each aspect of flexibility, of weight shifting that happened during turning, challenging this aspect, and develop this exercise program that we are testing right now in our laboratory with a randomized control trial.
It's interesting that you've used technology basis for this, because we haven't heard much about that before. How long has that been going on, and what does that approach to rehab entail?
So basically, we use technology for two different purposes in this study. One is to measure turning with objective measures. So we have wearable sensor to put on the waist and on the lower feet and on the feet. And we send this sensor home with our participant. They wear them for 7 days, and then they ship them back to us. And also a part of the study is doing the intervention. So we use technology to assess the effect of the intervention with objective measure. So see if we have an improvement after the intervention. But we also use a little bit of technology to deliver the intervention. In fact, we have people that our participant can start on a harness, which just takes a little bit of body weight, is connected to the ceiling, but it leaves you free to do any movement that you want to do. It's called 0G. So we have people starting the program in the harness because they can challenge themselves more without having fear of falling, basically. And so we have about 8 people who already finished up the program. And our goal is to have 30 people with the program and 30 people who do a control condition for 6 weeks.
Dr. Gale, have there been many advancements in this field?
In terms of gait and balance research?
Yeah.
I think so. I think with neurologists through the years carefully observing, and also physical therapists and patients themselves, people with Parkinson's, carefully observing the times when they have troubles, such as turning, like Martina was discussing, or going through a narrow threshold, like I'm sure many people, or maybe several people on this call, know that it can be problematic to go into an elevator or through a tight doorway, particularly with freezing of gait. These observations have led to advances in interventions such as specific physical therapy programs, like the big type of BIG type of physical therapy, and also different devices that can be used in terms of walking aids. So certain walkers that incorporate cueing, like Martina was speaking about, so lasers and metronome type things. Many of you are familiar with those. Those have come out of this type of work in general. And Martina specifically has an interest in a vibration, especially type of cueing for freezing of gait. And she has a project she's working on with that as well. So I think that's, in terms of the physical therapy and day-to-day mobility interventions, there have been some real practical outcomes from this type of work. And then I think the other aspect of it too is all these, the ability to monitor things more in a mobile fashion, of course, is helpful in conjunction with telehealth in these days, during and post-pandemic, for more patients to have access to care and research, but also we would like for one day for some of this technology to be used as a surrogate for some of the things that we like to do on physical exam. So when the neurologist feels your muscle tone or test your backward balance in clinic, we would like to be able to use some of these measures, not really to replace that, but in a telehealth type setting to approximate it, so we can follow patients remotely more closely.
Sounds like you've been able to maybe get a little bit of an advantage out of the pandemic, where it's been really a negative in most aspects of it. This is possibly an advantage.
I think so. I think for sure there's been a lot of funding flowing down from NIH and NINDS for telehealth-based interventions, and we're starting to work on some of those now through the Balance Lab.
Got a question. Are you accepting participants in your clinical trials now?
Yes, and we're so grateful for this opportunity to be able to speak a bit about them. Martina was just discussing the turning study, and I think is still looking also for participants with Parkinson's who have falls for intervention for that. I also
people have to be in Portland, or can they be in other parts of the country?
They can be in other parts of the country. I mean, it's certainly easier if they're regional, of course, but we've had patients already from Eastern Oregon for some of these things, and sometimes they come from much, much farther away. We also have a study we really wanted to highlight called the SPARKS-3 clinical trial, and that one is more for recently diagnosed Parkinson's disease, specifically patients not yet on medication. So for that group of folks who haven't started medication yet for any long period of time, and it's an high intensity exercise intervention treadmill based study. And there's some really good data to suggest, of course, that exercise helps symptoms in Parkinson's, but more and more convincing data to show that it slows progression of Parkinson's disease. And that's what this trial is about, looking at different heart rates of exercise. So we're recruiting for that one as well. And that's a neat study in the sense that it's supervised exercise and then exercise at home. But you get a lot of data in terms of activity monitoring and oxygen use when you're exercising, in collaboration with the physiology lab here at OHSU. So it's neat to sort of get the monitoring for the exercise in a kind of formal way, because we all know we should be exercising more, but I think having that structure is really, really nice and sets a good tone and pattern for living with Parkinson's.
What would you say is the biggest misconception you have to deal with when you're trying to get people to be a part of the studies?
I sometimes people worry that that they may have to pay for the studies, and that's absolutely not true. We sometimes have that concern, and we just want to make that clear as part of research. That's not how it works. Sometimes people, I think, worry about the frequency of the visits or transport, and there are monies and these grants to offset some of that, particularly, of course, these days with the setting and of increased gas prices and everything. So we do have means to help people participate. And I think maybe some people worry that they might not get anything out of it, or it's just too much of a time commitment. But we do have a variety of studies with different frequency of visits. So I think there's a good variety for folks who may still be working and busy. We can make accommodations, and some of the studies are suitable for that, and some are a little more intense in terms of the number of visits. I don't know, Martina, what do you think about that, barriers to participation?
I think you outline it very well. I think maybe some people also fear that when we have screenings in order to determine eligibility to a particular study, they maybe are afraid and they fear that they're not eligible. But anyway, we have a variety of studies, and some of them have more strict criteria than others. And the nice thing is that at this point in the lab, we have studies for early Parkinson's disease, as Dr. Dale was just saying, the SPARK study, which is actually a multicentric trial. The primary PI is at Northwestern, is Dr. Daniel Korkos, and there are 27 sites across the US, and we feel very fortunate to be one of those sites. And said that we also have exercise study for more severe symptoms, such as the turning one. In fact, we do want people who experienced a fall in the past for the exercise, for the turning exercise program. Yeah.
And we will be sending out a post-event email, by the way, that'll have all the details on how to be a part of these. Dr. Mancini, are you seeing any progress in your work so far?
We're seeing progress. We're seeing that, I think the objective measure of balance and gait that we have for the lab or for the clinic are sensitive to Parkinson's disease, and they are reliable measure, meaning that if you measure them during the day or in different days at the same time, you get the same measure. And they might be able also to track progression of the disease, so seeing kind of like subtle changes. They are not yet implemented in clinical trials, but we hope that soon, our clinical practice, but we hope that soon we can have that gap changed. And there are studies that are already using some objective measures as well. There is also a push, and there has been in the past years, to quantify balance and gait impairments in the home. So not during a prescribed task during a clinic visit or in the laboratory, but rather at home, because we know that when people come and see us in the laboratory, they are happy, but it's also just they tend to perform better than the usual gait and balance at home. And we really see only a snapshot out of 24 hours, out of 7 days of the week, and there can be dramatic fluctuation during the days and also across the same day. So by being able to send a wearable sensor at home, potentially you can measure walking and balance fluctuation in a way in which the participant will not even realize that. And so there is really a lot of push to go in that direction, and some projects in Europe that are trying to look for a little bit of standardization, because right now there are many different algorithms and many different approaches that can be used, but not a standardized way for the home measures. While for clinic and lab, I think we have seen very good progress in the past few years in standardizing some measures of gait and balance.
Sounds like a lot of progress is being made then, in other words.
It feels always small, but
Yeah.
small by small we'll find more progress. Yes.
Bit by bit, right? It does take time, and this very interesting research that you're doing. Anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap things up?
I think that we are very happy to be contacted by any participant, and we'll find a study. And thank you for this opportunity. I was very happy to participate and talk a little bit about our research.
Yeah, I should mention, Dr. Dale, there's more than one study we're talking about here, of course.
Right. So more than one study, all within the Balance Laboratory, studies for Parkinson's at various stages, like Martina was saying, and study for progressive supranuclear palsy that is one that is my focus, but I help with all the other balance studies as well. And hopefully more and more conditions over time. But yeah, lots of opportunity. There's been a recent influx of good news about getting grants funded. So we're happy to be able, I think in the near future, there'll be quite a few studies on offer, and there are already several.
Doctors, thank you very much. And I want to remind everyone that Jen is going to be sending out a post-program email, which will give you more information about the trials we just talked about, give you a link to APDA Northwest YouTube channel as well, where you can find a recording of this program. The next and last session of APDA Passport to Research series will be next Wednesday, July 27th, the same time at noon Pacific. We'll be joined by Dr. Jason Aldred from Selkirk Neurology and Inland Northwest Research in Spokane. He'll be discussing current trials of tackling motor fluctuations. Thanks everyone for joining us. Doctors, thank you again for being with us, and we hope to see you all on July the 27th for the next APDA Passport to Research series installment. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dave.